What's Antony and Cleopatra really about, according to Pantaloon? Antony and Cleopatra, in my opinion, is a play which asks the question, is it ever possible in a personal relationship to really trust the other person? To really trust the other person? The subjects of unreliability, jealousy, and betrayal regularly occur as themes in many of Shakespeare's other plays. For example, Othello shows us a man who is so convinced that his wife is unfaithful, although in fact she is entirely innocent, that he murders her. Similarly, another play, The Winter's Tale, features a king, Leontes, who is so certain that his totally innocent wife has been impregnated by his best friend that he imprisons her and orders that the baby be abandoned in the wilds. And again, the plot of Much Ado About Nothing hinges on Claudio being falsely convinced that his blameless bride-to-be is unfaithful. So he interrupts the wedding ceremony to humiliate her by a public accusation. Even Shakespeare's farce, The Merry Wives of Windsor, is a story of attempted adultery, which includes, in Master Ford, a comic caricature of the jealous husband racked by insecurity. Although in these plays the men's fears are finally revealed to be unfounded, there are plenty of passionate speeches in which they pour out the agony of their consuming suspicions. And then there are other plays in which the terrors turn out indeed to be the awful truth. The Merchant of Venice portrays a man, Antonio, who is desperately wounded when his younger male friend abandons him in order to marry a wealthy woman. And Twelfth Night includes another character, also called Antonio, who also loves a younger man and feels betrayed by him. And even Hamlet centres on a prince who is shocked after his father's death to see his mother, apparently unaffected by any feelings of bereavement, immediately marry her late husband's brother. Her behaviour seems to Hamlet to be a kind of infidelity. Frailty, thy name is woman. These themes of unreliability and insecurity continue in Shakespeare's poems. For example, in Sonnet 138, which begins, "When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies." The repeated expression of these feelings in Shakespeare's work seems to me to be driven by a personal obsession, and I presume that it is an outlet for the emotional pain that he has suffered in his private life and which he cannot escape. So I think that in Antony and Cleopatra we're on familiar ground. Although politics and war drive the plot, they are merely the backdrop. The main focus is on the relationship of the eponymous lovers, their jealousies, their insecurities, and their betrayals. Of course, some people prefer to think that Antony must be what they call great, and that he suffers a tragic fall. But the play opens with the information that he's already fallen about as far as he can go, from the heights of his public image as Mars, the god of war, to the depths of being derided as a strumpet's fool. And anyway, I don't think that Shakespeare deals in such simplistic cliches as tragic heroes. In the other plays I've mentioned, the male is the one who feels betrayed. But in Antony and Cleopatra, it is the male who actually proves himself untrustworthy. Antony enjoys the benefits of his status as a leader in the army and in government, but he has run away from his responsibilities. When he is in Egypt, he hypocritically attempts to justify abandoning his commitments by claiming that he has rejected Roman values. Let Rome in Tiber melt. His words sound wonderful, but they are only grandiose posturing. He asserts that his self-indulgent hedonism is in fact the nobleness of life. But the voices of public opinion have already judged that his function is merely to cool a gypsy's lust. When he returns to Rome, however, he again reverses his values, boasting that he is ruled by the code of honor. Caesar's blunt charge, "You have broken the article of your oath," is met with the unconvincing defense, "The honor is sacred that he talks on now." But the honorable man is one who does his duty to the state, which Antony is blatantly not doing, so he again seems a hypocrite. And his blustering and undignified excuses about being the hapless victim of alcohol only confirm that he is a ruler who is not worthy of respect or trust. Another promise that he has broken is his marriage vow. Cleopatra points out that he is the one who is committing adultery. Why did he marry Fulvia and not love her? He, of course, ignores that breach of faith and announces that his new commitment is to stay with Cleopatra. "Here is my space." But then he immediately changes his mind and his values when he decides to return to Rome. So his hyperbolic declarations of fidelity are quickly forgotten. And it is the woman, Cleopatra, who is the victim of betrayal, as is Fulvia. Romantic readers, desperate to have a tragic hero, would hope that his vacillation would be accompanied by agonies of moral debate and immense emotional turmoil. But in fact, his words, "These strong Egyptian fetters I must break," are disappointingly brief and perfunctory. The unwelcome fact is that he firstly abandons Roman duties in favour of Egyptian pleasures, deserting his wife, and then he abandons Egypt for Rome, deserting his mistress. His subsequent marriage to Octavia is, of course, only a political union, which was quite normal at Shakespeare's time, but he seems unconcerned about the pain it will cause Cleopatra, who will feel betrayed. And then he immediately indicates to Octavia that he will also betray her. "The world and my great office will sometimes divide me from your bosom," which I find brutally callous. Furthermore, he's only too ready to both break his pact with Caesar and also to abandon his new wife, Octavia, using the self-righteous excuse, "If I lose mine honor, I lose myself." His words sound hollow and hypocritical. His unreliability is so great that his description of himself in a message to Cleopatra as the firm Roman seems ludicrous. Next, it is his army who are the victims of his desertion in the first battle against Caesar, when Antony causes their defeat. Although he initially admits culpability, "I have fled myself," he then switches emotional allegiance once again by reverting to the Roman code and promising to commit suicide. "I have myself resolved upon a course which has no need of you." But as usual, this honourable resolution is immediately forgotten. He doesn't kill himself. Instead, he evades responsibility for the military disaster by blaming Cleopatra. "Egypt, thou knewst too well, my heart was to thy rudder tied by the strings. Yet even this position is short-lived, and he changes sides again by allying with her. "Give me a kiss. Even this repays me." Which may seem romantic, but actually is just another example of his wild inconstancy. Having betrayed almost everyone, he then has the effrontery to accuse Cleopatra of treachery. When he finds Phidias kissing her hand, he dares to act the injured party. "You have been a boggler ever." But his explosion of fury is merely an outlet for his sense of humiliation at his failure in battle, and a distraction from the awareness that it's his own fault. Whipping Phidias is supposed to be a punishment for the envoy being involved in Cleopatra's disloyalty. But in fact, Antony is only taking out his resentment against the victorious Caesar by attacking his messenger. "Whip him, fellows, till like a boy you see him cringe his face and whine aloud for mercy." I find Antony's behaviour here demeaning and contemptible. It might be argued that when Enobarbus leaves, Antony is for once the victim of disloyalty. But since the general's erratic behaviour is now completely irrational, Enobarbus's reluctant decision to leave him is entirely justified and cannot be called a betrayal. By his madness, Antony has forced Enobarbus to desert and is responsible for his death. Characteristically, when Antony wins the second battle, he is totally transformed again, and his attitude towards Cleopatra changes diametrically. This time, he actually urges her to allow a soldier to kiss her hand. The euphoria of victory means that his earlier fury at Phidias is entirely forgotten. Antony is, as ever, breathtakingly unreliable. And then, when he loses the third battle, he inevitably reverts to his previous behaviour. He once more blames Cleopatra for his own stupidity. "This foul Egyptian hath betrayed me. Triple-turned whore. Betrayed I am. Oh, this false soul of Egypt. Like a right gypsy. Beguiled me." Since he emphasizes her nationality, this foul Egyptian, he seems to have altered his self-image again to that of being a loyal Roman. This deafening outburst, however, sounds like just another tantrum to escape responsibility. He again attaches blame to others and resorts to violence. Last time it was against a helpless Phidias. This time it's against a woman, Cleopatra. "The witch shall die!" Another total volte-face. Predictably, the message that Cleopatra has killed herself effects yet another change. He takes refuge in the fantasy that he is true, after all, to the Roman code of honour, and is dying a dignified death. A Roman by a Roman, valiantly vanquished. This preposterous fabrication is underlined by his botched suicide, which is a scene of embarrassing bathos. And of course he changes from one extreme of wanting to murder Cleopatra to the other extreme of wanting to marry her. The great adulterer believes that they will finally be wedded in an afterlife. "I will be a bridegroom in my death." After all his acts of disloyalty on earth, he still dreams that in a spirit world he will at last be capable of a commitment to fidelity. To be fair, there are moments when Antony is very likeable, His common touch is heartwarming when he bids farewell to his servants, shaking their hands and thanking them. And his generosity is impressive when he forgives Enobarbus for his desertion and sends his treasure after him. And naturally, I am captivated by his magnificent poetry, particularly when he feels that his sense of identity is evaporating. Sometime we see a cloud that's dragonish, a vapour sometime like a bear or lion, a towered citadel, a pendant rock, a forked mountain, or blue promontory with trees upon it that nod unto the world and mock our eyes with air. Thou hast seen these signs. They are black Vespers pageants. But despite these touching moments, he cannot be pardoned as some tragic heroes are, with the excuse that he is a victim of fate, or of a villain's machinations, or of a tragic flaw in his exceptional character. The truth is that he's only a victim of his own chronic intemperance. He's simply a man who wants to have his cake and still eat it. Indeed, he wants to consume endless boozy banquets, with Cleopatra served as the sweet course. And when he suffers the consequences of his excess, he accuses Cleopatra of betrayal, ignoring his own derelictions. These include breaking faith with her, with Fulvia, and with Octavia, deserting his post as triumvir, breaking his agreement with Caesar, and then betraying his army into defeat by his gross emotional self-indulgence to add to his physical excesses. After this catalogue of folly and treachery, it is shameful that he should blame Cleopatra and accuse her of betrayal. As I've said, I'm fundamentally skeptical about the very concept of a tragic hero, but I'm certainly convinced that Antony doesn't have the qualifications. In fact, I reluctantly find myself agreeing with the repellently cold Caesar, who compares the middle-aged Antony to boys who, being mature in knowledge, pawn their experience to their present pleasure. So one response to Antony would be, "Oh, grow up." Unfortunately, other characters on the Egyptian side demonstrate that both loyalty and disloyalty can be equally disastrous. Enobarbus is compelled to physically desert Antony, but is so emotionally faithful that he dies damning himself as a master leaver. Eros stays true to his master when he refuses to assist in Antony's suicide, but paradoxically he's actually breaking his faith. Antony says, "Thou art sworn, Eros, that on my command thou then wouldst kill me." So Eros breaks his promise. Like Enobarbus, he is emotionally faithful, but physically disloyal. And again, he dies. The characters in Cleopatra's court also end up dead. Alexis switched sides and helped the enemy, but for this pains Caesar hath hanged him. And meanwhile, Charmian and Iris stay loyal to their mistress, and so they also die. The best outcome is achieved by Canidius, another of Antony's soldiers, who defects to Caesar, but is given no honourable trust. Caesar, like Cleopatra, is only loyal to himself. He has already arrested Lepidus, one of his fellow triumvirs, and now eliminates the other, Antony. But he cannot rely on the loyalty of others. when he speaks the final words of the play, "Come, Dolabella, see high order in this great solemnity," we remember that it was Dolabella who warned Cleopatra of Caesar's real intentions. So the victor is ironically unaware that he is entrusting this final duty to the follower who in fact betrayed him. I began this discussion with asking whether it's possible in a personal relationship to really trust the other person. I think I've now demonstrated that Antony simply can never be relied on. All you can trust him to do is to let you down. But when we consider Cleopatra, the question becomes far more complicated and much more interesting. Whereas Antony could, in a generous estimate, be characterized as a romantic, Cleopatra, on the other hand, must be termed very much a realist. She has to be a realist. She's a sole woman defending her position in the ruthless masculine world of power politics. And to compound her problems, she's now middle-aged. So the advantages of her physical attractions are now on the wane. Furthermore, she's only too aware that lovers come and go. She's had previous affairs with Julius Caesar and with the elder Pompey, and is not impressed by men's vows of eternal fidelity. The only person she can always rely on to take care of her is herself. To add to her disadvantages, she has to suffer the ancient prejudices against women. Generations of men have been disturbed to find themselves sexually aroused by a woman, and have absolved themselves of most of their guilt by blaming the female. She is traditionally said to be an evil enchantress, casting a magic spell over the innocent male. Shakespeare includes the force of this prejudice with the accusations that Cleopatra is enchanting, this grave charm, like a right gypsy, and the witch, while Antony is exonerated as the noble ruin of her magic. And reinforcing men's self-serving sexism is the comparison of the queen to a serpent. All of Shakespeare's audience knew the Bible story of the Garden of Eden, in which the devil, as a serpent, tempts Eve to break God's law, and she in turn tempts Adam to do likewise. This story enabled centuries of misogynistic male preachers to blame women for the original fall of man and the subsequent regular falls into temptation of all men. And savage church sermons even merged the two culprits. So a woman was vilified as actually being a serpent, wicked and deceitful, and thus men were removed from most moral responsibility in sexual relations. Cleopatra awakens this prejudice in the audience when she mentions that Antony calls her "my serpent of old Nile," and Lepidus observes that in Egypt are strange serpents. Then the clown, before her suicide, accuses women of deceit. "A very honest woman, but something given to lie," and connects this with his asp, the serpent. "The worm is not to be trusted." Shakespeare even arranges that at her death, the queen kisses Iris, who falls and dies as if she has been poisoned by the serpent Cleopatra. If the queen is to overcome all these massive handicaps, she must be constantly and ruthlessly realistic. She cannot afford to be as carelessly self-indulgent as Antony, wallowing in dreams of past glories, wherein I lived the greatest prince of the world. Nor can she be as blindly irrational as he is. Enobarbus blames a diminution in our captain's brain. On the contrary, her head must rule her heart if she is to survive, and Cleopatra is primarily a great survivor. Her realism is apparent in her very first words in the play, which are an expression of skepticism about Antony's protestations. If it be love indeed, of course the tone here is difficult to establish. The lovers' exchange may be little more than a game, or it may be one of the Queen's tactics to keep Antony's interest by being provocative and setting him challenges. But often games and banter conceal serious concerns, so her skepticism, if it be love, might be quite genuine. The product of her experience of the fickleness of human beings, as well as being the constant wariness essential for survival in the political jungle. Her doubts about her lover's sincerity seem to be vindicated by his betrayal of his wife. The jealous Cleopatra names Fulvia 4 times in this conversation, which doesn't sound to me like playful banter. Antony's hyperbolic declaration, "Let Rome in Tiber melt, and the wide arch of the ranged empire fall," is quickly deflated by her prosaic accusation, "Excellent falsehood." Indeed, although Philo branded Antony as strumpet's fool, Cleopatra applies the term fool to herself, suggesting that she, the woman, is the potential dupe of trickery by the male. But by declaring, "I'll seem the fool I am not," she asserts that she needs to pretend to be naive in order to make him happy, that pretense is necessary to maintain a relationship. So while he pursues his fantasies, "We stand up peerless," she accepts reality and works hard to keep her man and her position and power. She even specifically articulates her strategy of using duplicity to constantly wrong-foot Antony and renew his interest. If you find him sad, say I'm dancing. If in mirth, report that I am sudden sick. When Charmian advises her against this course, she replies, "Thou teachest like a fool the way to lose him." This may provoke in some of the audience head-shaking disapproval at women's cunning dishonesty, but it produces nods of agreement in others at the sad necessity of having to put on an act sometimes to prevent your partner becoming bored. When Cleopatra launches into a pretense of imminent collapse, "Help me away, dear Charmian, I shall fall," it can be performed comically on stage, but it would be more interesting if it were played with apparent authenticity, so the audience are momentarily convinced by her behavior, as Antony is, and then realize that they too have been tricked. The vehemence of her accusations against Antony seems genuine enough, still displaying resentment about his bond to his wife, the married woman. She continues this with a scathing denunciation that she herself has been mightily betrayed by the greatest liar. She says this was only to be expected, as he has been false to Fulvia and has uttered mouth-made vows which break themselves in swearing. And she claims, "At the first I saw the treasons planted." Of course, it is hugely ironic that she is accusing him of dishonesty while she's being deliberately dishonest herself. She even again pretends that she may faint. "Cut my lace, Charmian," and has the nerve to allege that it is Antony who is acting. "Play one scene of excellent dissembling." Her behaviour is manipulative, it is hypocritical, and it may even be comic, but it is effective in continuing her ability to fascinate. And she is sure that it is essential. She must be duplicitous towards Antony if she is to prevent him from being false to her. This doesn't mean that the Queen is a model of fidelity. When he returns to Rome, she compensates herself by recalling her affairs with broad-fronted Caesar and great Pompey. This is an aspect of her supreme egotism. But of course, winners are ruthlessly selfish. That's how they become winners. So her assault on the messenger who brings news of Antony's marriage is not only the response of a jealous woman, it is also the fighting instinct of a fierce competitor. Enobarbus's magnificent description of the Queen on the river Cydnus has elements of vulgarity, excess, and sheer bling. But this is not a display unique to ancient Egypt. Shakespeare was familiar with extreme regal spectacle at his own time, and was witness to the latest fashion of extravagant court masks. Nor is Cleopatra's water pageant merely the exhibition of boundless vanity. Instead, it is more importantly a calculated ploy to overwhelm Mark Antony, and it's successful. Agrippa's response to the description, "Oh, rare for Antony, rare Egyptian," indicates that he too is captivated, and so confirms her belief that men can be won by a full assault on their senses. Again, Cleopatra just accepts the primitive patterns of human behavior and puts on the kind of show that people desire in order to get what she wants. This means, however, that we are never sure when she is only acting. After the first battle is lost, she appears near collapse. "Let me sit down, O Juno, sustain me, oh!" But unfortunately, we see her seem to faint several times in the play, so we suspect that she may be faking. And when we are told, "Death will seize her," we are similarly skeptical. Enobarbus said, "I have seen her die 20 times. And furthermore, dying is often used in this play to refer to collapse after orgasm. And Antony's command, "Fall not a tear," reminds us that she's always able to produce tears. Enobarbus also said, "This cannot be cunning in her," but immediately added the rider, "If it be, she makes a shower of rain as well as Jove." Antony can always flex his sword arm to get what he wants, whereas some people have to resort to their lacrimal glands. During the aftermath of the military disaster, she once more shows her capacity for realism. While Antony wallows in self-pity, shifts blame onto her, and issues a fatuous challenge to Caesar, she simply faces facts. She asks Enobarbus for a dispassionate assessment. Is Antony or we in fault for this? And is given the blunt rejoinder, Antony only, that will make his will lord of his reason. So she, behaving with the rationality that he lacks, begins negotiations with the victorious Caesar via his messenger, Thidius. This goads Antony into a deafening, aggressive rant, but she eventually begins to take control by puncturing his bellowing diatribe with a laconic, "Have you done yet?" Then, to restore him to some approximation of lucidity, she's compelled to provide him with the kind of melodramatic rhetoric that he demands. "From my cold heart let heaven engender hail, and poison it in the source, and the first stone drop in my neck. As it determines, so dissolve my life." She is correct in her estimation of his facile psychology, for he responds equally hyperbolically, "I will be treble-sinewed, hearted-breathed, and fight maliciously." So she's managed to calm him down, refocus his thoughts, and reignite his fighting spirit, even if it has to be achieved by manipulation and deception. Her response to his accusations is, "Not know me yet," which is a wonderful example of sophistry, the art of using deliberately ambiguous language in order to mislead someone. The intellectually unsophisticated Antony assumes that "not know me yet" means, "Don't you know that I am faithful?" And is eager to interpret it that way. But "not know me yet" could mean, "Don't you know that I always put myself first, and therefore will be unfaithful if necessary?" Or again, it could mean, "Don't you know that I am a realist, dismissing your romantic fantasies about honor and fidelity and simply addressing practicalities?" My own response to Cleopatra's "not know me yet" is, "No, Antony does not know you and never will, although you know him all too well." If the relationship is to survive, it will be because she finds a way to preserve it. Meanwhile, her behavior is entirely justified by Enobarbus's verdict on Antony. "Valor preys on reason," which obliges his closest follower to desert. At least the queen stays with him for the time being. When she has rekindled his optimism, she no longer needs to manage his behavior. But Shakespeare ensures that the sounds of treachery still hang in the air. When she's helping him dress for the second battle, he says, "Thou art the armourer of my heart. False, false." By this he means, "You're trying to help me put on my armour, but you're doing it all wrong." However, the hovering irony is that his words, "false, false," sound like another accusation of betrayal. And then the final twist in the scene is that after he leaves, she actually voices pessimism. That he and Caesar might determine this great war in single fight. Then, Antony, but now. Well, on. We realize that she has supported Antony in his buoyant optimism by hiding her true thoughts and feelings. As ever, she uses her skills in duplicity to make him happy. But Antony's emotions continue to ricochet from one extreme to the other, and so when he loses the third battle, he again puts the blame on Cleopatra and explodes into crazed aggression. "The witch shall die! She dies for it!" The queen is forced to flee, and then protect her own life by sending a message that she is dead. Of course, she's guilty of telling a lie, but only to save herself from a murderous madman, and her culpability is further diminished by the fact that it is Charmian who suggests the trick. Then Cleopatra instructs Mardian to say that the last I spoke was Antony, and word it prithee piteously, which is another example of her recognizing that Antony is enslaved by his passions, and that therefore the only way of dealing with him is to use her wits to exert control over his emotions. Yet despite all the cheating that they both commit, Antony still clings to the romantic belief that he can tell who is reliable and who isn't. None about Caesar trust, but Proculeius. However, Cleopatra knows better than he whom she can trust. My resolution and my hands I'll trust, none about Caesar. It is notable that she did not repeat Antony's exception of Proculeius from the deceivers, and of course Antony as usual gets it wrong. Proculeius does later deceive her. Cleopatra only trusts herself. Shakespeare deliberately doesn't give Cleopatra any soliloquies, so the theatre audience is nearly as unsure about her true thoughts and feelings as Antony is, and is as intrigued as all the characters. For example, when he's carried to the monument, she seems distraught, wailing in apocalyptic invocation, "O sun, burn the great sphere thou mov'st in! Darkling stand the varying shore of the world." But what she says is immediately undercut by what she does. When he asks for a final kiss, she returns to the very human concern of self-preservation. "I dare not, dear." So her dying lover is subjected to the indignity and pain of being hauled aloft like a piece of luggage. And her selfishness is shockingly blatant when he requests, "Let me speak a little," and she shouts him down, "No, let me speak." She refuses to allow him, even on his deathbed, to upstage her and rob her of her role as tragic heroine. Even when Antony dies, she outrageously again seizes back all the attention by imitating his collapse. She appears to faint, and Iris even exclaims, "She is dead too!" But we know that appearing to faint is one of her tricks, and we notice that she quickly recovers. Her performance has not finished. Furthermore, she cannot confine herself to eulogizing the dead Antony. Instead, she must take center stage and make herself the focus of sympathy. "No more but e'en a woman, and commanded by such poor passion as the maid that milks and does the meanest chairs." She then tries to enhance her tragic status by borrowing the Roman concept of honorable suicide. What's brave, what's noble, let's do it after the high Roman fashion. If she was sincere, she could kill herself at that moment, dying over Antony's body, like Romeo and Juliet, and the play could end at the close of Act 4. But it continues throughout Act 5 because typically the promise of resolution and the briefest end is merely a pose. Cleopatra isn't a silly teenager going to hysterical and unnecessary extremes. She's a grown-up who knows that relationships end and people die, but we don't demand that surviving partners kill themselves. Of course, her determination to commit suicide is not genuine. She simply says and does what is emotionally appropriate at the time, and then reverts to her habitual pragmatism. Antony may have caused his own death, but she has no intention of conceding defeat and bringing about her own. She is determined to survive as long as she can. Her realistic approach is perhaps partially validated when Caesar shows similar pragmatism. Upon receiving news of Antony's death, he begins to grieve for him, with tears as sovereign as the blood of hearts. But his tears may be just as unconvincing as Cleopatra's, for he also quickly subordinates emotional display to political priorities. But I will tell you it's a meter season. And then Caesar's and Cleopatra's manoeuvres begin, as the honourable Roman tells lies to the false Egyptian, promising that he won't exhibit her to the Roman mob, while fully intending to do exactly that. For her life in Rome would be eternal in our triumph. Cleopatra begins her negotiations with Proculeius, the man whom Antony told her to trust. But she is not so gullible. I do not greatly care to be deceived, that have no use for trusting. In political intrigue, artifice is rampant on both sides. She mendaciously promises to learn a doctrine of obedience. But Caesar's equally treacherous soldiers grab her from behind. She dramatically draws a knife to kill herself, but is disarmed. And again Shakespeare ensures that we are uncertain about her sincerity. Does she really mean to harm herself? Or is this just another grand gesture, another piece of acting, another pretense of dying? Instead of actual suicide, we get a further speech rich with poetic intensity and exaggerated drama, promising death. Rather a ditch in Egypt be gentle grave unto me. Rather on Nilus mud lay me stark naked, and let the waterflies blow me into abhorring. But again, she doesn't actually proceed to meet her end in such a grand and grotesque manner. What she really does is continue her diplomatic moves. However, her chances of success diminish, and so she has to take comfort in her personal romantic fantasy. I dreamed there was an Emperor Antony. His legs bestrid the ocean, his reared arm crested the world. But her temporary retreat from reality is soon ended, when she asks Dolabella, "Think you there was, or might be, such a man as this I dreamed of?" He replies, "Gentle madam, no." However, the motive for her being reduced to planning suicide in earnest is not that her dream is dissipated, but that she will face humiliation. "He'll lead me then in triumph." She won't die for mutual love, only to avoid personal degradation. Shakespeare again leaves the theatre audience uncertain about her interchange with her treasurer Seleucus, and so she remains mysterious, and we are kept baffled and intrigued. Perhaps Caesar catches her out in her dishonesty, but more likely it is another scene that is being acted, that she has told Seleucus to reveal her deception, so as to trick Caesar into believing that she intends to stay alive, and so he can lead her in triumph. He may be taken in, but she isn't. Her verdict, "He words me, girls, he words me," is one liar's insight into another liar's subterfuge. Finally, Cleopatra is forced to go through with her threatened suicide, but unlike Antony, she will do it efficiently and with complete artistry. It will be her last great show. She refuses to allow her public image to be farcically degraded by professional actors. The quick comedians extemporally will stage us, and I shall see some squeaking Cleopatra buoy my greatness in the posture of a whore. She is determined to present herself at her best, and with all her theatrical skills, as she always has. Show me my women like a queen. Go fetch my best attires. Bring my crown and all. She instinctively demands her most impressive costume for her ultimate performance, and the connection is made with her earlier staged and costumed production. I am again for Cydnus to meet Mark Antony. Her attendants act as theatrical dressers to the star. Give me my robe, put on my crown. And now that all chance of escape is ended, she, like Antony, consoles herself with the fantasy that in death she will be faithful to marriage vows. Husband, I come. And Shakespeare provides the sound of captivating poetry to accompany the sight of the gilded icon on stage, and even dares to give the dying woman an image of life. Dost thou not see my baby at my breast, that sucks the nurse asleep? The final tableau is perfectly achieved after Charmian, acting as stage manager, adjusts a detail. Your crown's awry. I'll mend it and then play. So when the guard asks, is this well done? Meaning that suicide is a sin, she replies, it is well done, meaning also that it has been superbly performed. Even Caesar admires the theatrical effect. She looks like sleep, as she would catch another Antony in her strong toil of grace. The supreme actress has achieved her greatest triumph, and Shakespeare's audience, like Caesar, is entranced. But remember that Shakespeare knew all about pretense and illusion. It was his job. He was an actor, a playwright, and probably a director, so his whole professional life was spent in creating and participating in contrived theatrical fictions. He survived financially by providing for his audience, as Cleopatra provided for her contemporaries, powerful spectacle and infinite variety. Indeed, this play is a kaleidoscope of contrasting characters, cultures, and costumes, and a roller coaster of extreme emotional highs and lows. He even refers to his own trickery by including the Queen's refusal to see an inadequate young male actor play her. Some squeaking Cleopatra, boy, my greatness, while that sentiment is actually being voiced by a young male actor playing her. It sounds wonderful, it looks wonderful, but it's a calculated performance. And when Cleopatra is creating her final magnificent scene, it is really Shakespeare who is masterminding the climactic dramatic effect. So some members of the audience may condemn the Queen for her deceptions, while, with unconscious irony, applauding Shakespeare's deceptions. In fact, the status and power of both the Roman general and the Egyptian queen are built on their public images, which do not accord with reality. There is a short scene in which a Roman soldier, Ventidius, says that he cannot take credit for the victory he has just won. Instead, it must be attributed to the absent Antony, who we've just seen drunkenly dancing the Egyptian bacchanals. I'll humbly signify what in his name, that magical word of war, we have effected. Similarly, when we are told that Cleopatra appears in the marketplace in the habiliments of the goddess Isis, it adds to the manufactured fiction. And their reputations are further exaggerated by the comparisons of Cleopatra to Venus and to Isis, and the comparisons of Antony to Mars and to Hercules. So both protagonists cultivate the false notion that human beings can be the equals of gods, and other references to Jove, Jupiter, Mercury, Phoebus, and the gods reinforce these romantic aspirations. Unfortunately, this can result in their not only deceiving others, but also deceiving themselves by believing their own public images. When Antony's offered the choice of fighting on the land or on the sea, he announces, "I would they'd fight in the fire or in the air," as if he is superhuman. And Cleopatra moves from, "I dreamed there was an Emperor Antony," to, at her end, apparently believing her fantasy. "Methinks I hear Antony call. I see him rouse himself to praise my noble act. I hear him mock the luck of Caesar." But her self-deception would be understandable to Shakespeare. As a theatre performer, he would know that not only can an audience be manipulated into credulity, but even the actor, like Cleopatra, can sometimes become so deeply involved as to half believe the pretense. The arch-deceiver can even deceive herself. I earlier quoted from Sonnet 138. "When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies." The poem ends with acceptance of the idea that deceit in their relationship is a necessary evil. Indeed, self-deception may also be required, and the man is reciprocally deceitful. "Therefore I lie with her, and she with me, and in our faults by lies we flattered be." Dishonesty from a loved one may hurt, but unfortunately human beings may at times require it, as Cleopatra knows. One final point. Rome is regularly associated in this play with earth, which is said to be reliable as you can stand on it, and Egypt is associated with water, which is said to be unreliable as you can't stand on it. So Antony is warned, "Do not fight by sea. Trust not to rotten planks. Let the Egyptians and the Phoenicians go a-ducking. We have used to conquer standing on the earth." The connection of water with treachery is continued when Pompey entertains Antony and Caesar on board his ship, and Minos proposes that they cut their guests' throats. Also, Cleopatra put Antony under her spell by her pageant on the waters of the river Cydnus. And at the end of the play, the queen pictures herself escaping from the two lower elements, earth and water, and ascending to the higher elements. "I am fire and air. My other elements I give to baser life." But this is not the only significance of the four elements in the play. They were regarded as the sole constituents of the universe, and yet they were known to be unreliable. All physical matter changes. When Cleopatra says, "Let heaven engender hail," she's referring to a substance, hail, which is solid and equated with the element earth. But by the action of another element, fire, it becomes a third element, water. Solid hail melts and becomes liquid water. And then, under the further influence of fire, it changes again, evaporating into the fourth element, air. So solid becomes liquid, which becomes vapor. Earth becomes water and then air. And then the clouds of water vapor up in the air condense and rain falls. And so the process continues eternally. The language of the play constantly refers to this flux. Melt, dissolve, discandy, winds and waters, cloud, vapor, the fire that quickens Nilus slime, cannot hold this visible shape. Nothing in our universe is permanent. Cleopatra may aver, "I am marble constant, now the fleeting moon, no planet is of mine." But Antony has called her our terrene moon, identifying her with its variations. And this may trigger connections between the moon's cycle and women's menstrual cycles, with the regular changes effected both physically and emotionally. Furthermore, when she demands, "Darklings stand the varying shore of the world," she seems to refer to the daily cycles of light and darkness, and the moon's influence on the constant fluctuation of the tides. Nothing is static. And of course, plants exhibit a yearly cycle of decay of the old and growth of the new. So Caesar is said to be blossoming and wears the rose of youth, whereas Antony says of himself, "This pine is bark that overtopped them all." And Cleopatra complains, "Against the blown rose they may stop their nose that kneeled unto the buds." When we are reminded that mutability is a basic fact of our existence, it seems foolish for human beings to expect stability in anything or anyone. We may feel betrayed in our personal relationships, but that is because, like Antony, we quite unreasonably demand that the constantly moving physical processes of the universe should be halted to make us feel secure. People change. Everything changes. In response, we are shocked. We are deeply disappointed. We are even wounded. But it's the most basic fact of life. So perhaps we have to allow for it, if we are to be realistic. And perhaps we even have to try to accept it. I introduced this discussion with the question, what's Antony and Cleopatra really about? And glibly answered it with the assertion that the play examines the problem of trust in human relationships. But of course I've barely scratched the surface. The text is far too complicated to cover adequately in one talk. If I attempted that, we'd be here all night. In fact, we'd be here all week. And then even when I'd finished, I'd suddenly add, "Oh, there's something else I've just noticed." So perhaps by my ambitious title, I wasn't being completely frank. I hope you don't feel I was deceiving you.